Hello, and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Today we look at the case of three men who were involved in a drugs operation in Bradford and who had brutally tortured and murdered a man. Today we take a look at why they committed the crime and why they are trying to appeal the sentence that they were given. In the early hours of the 1st of July 2019, after a call from a member of the public, police officers discovered the body of Mohammed Ayaz, who was also known as Fizzy. He was naked and at the side of the road in Allerton area of Bradford. He was only 20 years old and he was formally pronounced dead at 4:40 AM. A post-mortem examination revealed that Mr Ayaz had been subject to multiple blunt force impacts to the face and head. He had deep bruising to his scalp, extensive soft tissue bruising to the face, 2 black eyes, bruising to his ears, multiple lacerations on his face and his mouth, a large laceration on his forehead, consistent with it having been hit with a blunt object, and a patterned injury to the forehead, which could have been caused by the sole of a shoe stamping on him. There were wounds which had been inflicted by a sharp object such as a knife or a piece of glass. Mr Ayaz also had bruising to his testicles, consistent with having been forcefully kicked. There was also bruising to the anal area, as if an object had been forced into his anus. A hard white substance of molten plastic was found on Mr Ayaz's back and buttocks. The blows that were inflicted to Mr Mohammed Ayaz's head had led to bleeding inside his brain and ultimately had caused his death. So what actually happened and why was Mr Ayaz assaulted in such a way? During the evening the night before, the 30th of June 2019, Mohammed Ayaz had been out with 2 friends when he had received a phone call from Raheel Khan, who was also known as Raleigh. He was asked to deliver some water, cigarettes and cannabis to Raheel Khan's business, which was based in Unit 2 of the Den Home Business Centre. Mr Ayaz was dropped off to the unit at around 8:32 PM. It was discovered by police that Raheel Khan had been running a Class A drug supply operation from the business unit. CCTV film footage was recovered from the business centre. Although the equipment did not cover the inside of Unit 2, significant aspects of what occurred outside the building were filmed. The footage showed the arrival of Mohammed Ayaz, by which time Raheel Khan, Suleiman Khan, Akash Rafiq, Junaid Hussain and Robert Wainwright were already present. Akash Rafiq is a suspect who has not yet been located by the police. Mohammed Ayaz remained inside Unit 2 until 10:15 PM when he was filmed coming out of the building. He was unsteady on his feet and he collided with various walls. Given what happened thereafter, he regrettably walked back in the direction of Unit 2. And he was filmed being attacked by Suleiman Khan and dragged back inside the unit. The evidence of what actually happened inside Unit 2 is derived from video clips which were recovered from mobile phones of Raheel Khan. These videos showed that Mohammed Ayaz was stripped naked, tortured and humiliated. Other footage showed Mr Wainwright pouring liquid over Mr Ayaz after he had been choked unconscious, and at 11:30 PM Mr Wainwright had urinated on him. Mr Ayaz's body was removed from the business unit, wrapped in a sheet, just after 2 AM on the 1st of July 2019, when Raheel Khan, Akash Rafiq and Robert Wainwright dragged Mohammed Ayaz outside and lifted his body into a car. On the basis of this sequence of events, the prosecution alleged that Mr Wainwright had participated with his co-accused in the attack of Mohammed Ayaz in the unit, and indeed intended to cause him at least very serious bodily harm. Mr Wainwright suggested that he worked for Raheel Khan's drug business and was paid £500 per week to do so. His job was to answer the telephone and organise street deals. Mr Wainwright's case at trial involved his acceptance that he was at the business unit during these events. He had maintained that he had been asleep, certainly for part of the incident. Mr Wainwright did not realise that Mohammed Ayaz was going to be attacked Mr Wainwright admitted that he had been involved in dragging Mr Ayaz back into the business unit after he had been attacked by Suleiman Khan. He had poured water on the victim to bring him around after he had been subjected to a chokehold, although he maintained that during the attack, he was in another room arranging drug deals on a telephone. He admitted that when he entered the main room, he was instructed to assault Mohammed Ayaz. Mr Wainwright then explains that he urinated on the victim, having refused to hit him. On his account, this was the extent of his involvement in the attack. After the assault, he cleaned up the scene using a mop, as one of his jobs was to keep the business unit clean. Mr Ayaz's body was wrapped in a sheet, and Mr Wainwright helped carry it to a place in the car. Mr Wainwright believed that Mr Ayaz was still alive at this stage, but he was unaware of what was going to happen to him. In trial, Raheel Khan gave evidence in which he admitted using violence on Mr Ayaz. Although he admitted to using violence, he denied intending to cause him very serious bodily harm. Suleiman Khan also testified and accepted that he had used violence on Mohammed Ayaz, and in any event, he had not intended to cause very serious bodily harm. Suleiman Khan had also gave evidence that Mr Wainwright had punched and kicked Mohammed Ayaz and inserted a mop into his anus. Junaid Hussain, Stephen Queenley, Shaib Shafi and Kaleem Hussain did not give evidence. Mr Wainwright has appealed his sentence on these grounds. During his first interview under caution on the 8th of July 2019, Mr Wainwright said that he had not been present at the scene or involved in the assault on the deceased. He had claimed that he had not assisted in moving the body or cleaning the unit. When shown some of the film footage summarised above, he said he had been mistaken for his twin brother. When shown some of the CCTV footage which had been taken from the unit, Mr Wainwright said that he had been mistaken for his twin brother. At trial, Mr Wainwright accepted that he had lied to the police during his first interview. He gave an explanation for his lies, as being, first, he did not consider the police would believe him due to his past relationship with the police, and second, he said he did not want to be labelled a grass, since he was fearful of how a person who has done such a thing is viewed in prison. Furthermore, he also suggested that his consumption of cannabis had affected his memory of these events. During a second interview under caution on the 9th of July 2019, Mr Wainwright did not answer any of the questions. At trial, he said this was because he had received legal advice to remain silent. In submissions by Mr Kane QC to the judge, it was contended on Mr Wainwright's behalf that it was inappropriate for the jury to be directed that it was open to them to draw from an adverse inference from Mr Wainwright's failure to mention the facts in the interview. It was explained to the jury in the following way by the judge. The defence say that the convictions that were brought against Mr Wainwright are relevant, as he says his reasons were for lying to police in the first place was for not wanting to be known as a grass, and he also remained silent in the second interview on the following day. In his evidence, he accepted that he told untruths, and when he was interviewed by the police, in other words, told lies. His reasoning, he said, was that this was just a relationship that he had with the police since he was very young. Every time he speaks to a policeman, he just goes quiet. He also didn't want to identify anyone because he didn't want to be labelled a grass, being fearful of how a grass is viewed in the prison community. The judge went on to explain, well, he did lie in his first interview. In brief summary, and it is no more than a summary for you, and you can read the interviews for yourselves again, Mr Wainwright said he was not involved in the death. He did not assist in moving the body or cleaning. He had no information about what had happened and was telling the truth. Mr Wainwright had said that he was with his missus, or sofa surfing, and had no contact with anyone involved in the murder. Mr Wainwright said he might have been at the business centre between 7 and 10 PM on the 30th of June, but he didn't see or have any phone contact with anyone. When Mr Wainwright was confronted with the CCTV footage, he said that this was his brother who was to be seen on the camera and not him. And Mr Wainwright has accepted, as I have said in this evidence to you, that he has deliberately lied He thought that Stephen Queenie had gotten rid of the CCTV and everybody else would be confident that he would not spill the beans, to use his phrase. In explaining the prosecution's case, the judge had this to say: "It is the prosecution's case that it was in furtherance of the agreement to say nothing about being involved in the incident that had happened with Raheel Khan and Suleiman Khan. Mr Wainwright had told these lies, seeking to protect himself and the others that he was with. That's all three of them, and the others that were involved when he told these lies. The prosecution say that this was the real reason behind his lying, and not the reason that he has told you today. The fact that someone tells a lie or lies is not necessarily evidence of guilt. Sometimes a defendant will lie for some reason other than guilt of the crime of which he is accused. Mr Wainwright has said, as I have reminded you, he lied because he, in effect, didn't want to be labelled a grass. If you are sure that the reasons he gives were not the reasons for his lies, then you may use his lies as evidence for support of the prosecution's case. But he should not be convicted wholly or mainly on the basis of finding that he has lied. In his evidence to you, he, like Suleiman Khan, also relies on something that he never mentioned when he was interviewed. Mr Wainwright admitted his presence and taking some role in the events surrounding the violence, albeit essentially limiting himself to just urinating on Mr Ayaz. And Mr Wainwright says he only did this because he was ordered to and felt compelled to act as he did. Raheel Khan, now as part of his defence, had admitted using violence himself on Mohammed Ayaz, but he had also relied on some things that he did not mention when he was questioned by the police, namely the role of Suleiman Khan in the violence. He had said that Suleiman Khan had kicked him after he had been dragged into the unit, striking him on the head with a bottle and inserting a bottle into his anus. The reason that Raheel Khan gave for this in his evidence for not having mentioned what happened before was that he was not wanting to implicate anyone else. He only wanted to talk about himself in the interviews. The prosecution say that the real reason was because he was actually engaged in a damage limitation exercise and acting in furtherance of the agreement that they had all had, him and his fellow defendants. They had reached an agreement that none of them would say anything, and certainly not implicate anyone else. Raheel Khan's failure to mention these matters may, in the words of caution that you have heard is given to every suspect when they are being interviewed, harm his defence. This is because you, the jury, may draw the conclusion from his failure to mention the facts in interview, the facts that he now mentions, that he may have in fact tailored his account to try and divert the responsibility from himself and attribute it to others as part of his defence as a charge of murder. You may only draw that conclusion if you think it's fair and a proper conclusion, and you are satisfied about three things. Firstly, that when he was interviewed, he could have reasonably have been expected to mention these facts that he is now able to mention. Second, that the only sensible explanation for his failure to mention the facts is that he had no answer at the time to explain his role and the role of others, or that none would stand up to scrutiny. Third, apart from his failure to mention these facts, the prosecution's case, as put to him in interview, was so strong that it clearly called for an answer from him. Now, if you do draw the conclusion to which I have said, and it is entirely up to you whether you do or not, you must not convict him wholly or mainly on the strength of it. You may, however, take into account as some additional support for the prosecution's case when deciding when his evidence about the facts are true. Suleiman Khan, as part of his defence, has also relied upon some of the things that he did not mention when he was questioned. Suleiman Khan has said in his evidence that he had himself video recorded some of the events in the unit relating to Mr Ayaz and himself, and he had himself abused him, but he had only done this because he was compelled to do so, and that he did not want any harm to come to him in any way. Now, his failure to mention any of this, as I directed you in relation to Raheel Khan, may harm his defence, This is because you may draw the conclusion from his failure to mention these facts in interview that he has now tailored his account to seek to divert responsibility from himself onto others, and of course to deal with the evidence that as he has seen the videos himself. Raheel Khan also gave evidence that he did not answer the questions on the advice of his legal representation. What is said between the solicitor and his client is confidential, and you are not entitled to know what that advice was. If you accept his evidence that he was so advised, that is obviously an important consideration, but it does not automatically prevent you from drawing any conclusion from his failure to mention these matters to which I have referred. Bear in mind that a person given legal advice has the choice whether to accept it or reject it. He was warned that any failure to mention facts which he later relied on at trial may harm his defence. Raheel Khan said that the second reason that he did not answer these questions was that he was scared. He did not want to be known as a grass. Someone may turn up at his house. He said that he was prepared to give the names in the trial because he had seen what other people were saying about him, and he had decided to tell the truth. Under cross-examination by Mr Wright, he accepted that he could have told the police what he knew, and that it was his decision to remain silent. All three had tried to appeal their sentence on the basis that the judge should not have said this to the jury. After hearing all the evidence, all three were found guilty. Raheel Khan, who was 27 at the time, must now serve a minimum term of 30 years. Suleiman Khan, who was 20, and Robert Wainwright, who was 26, must both spend at least 25 years in jail. It was revealed in the court that Mr Ayaz had been attacked because he had shown footage of Raheel Khan having sex and taunted him about it. The attack was carried out on the 30th of June in an industrial unit, where Mr Ayaz had went after a phone call from Mr Khan asking him to bring him cannabis. Michael Quinn from the CPS said he was systematically and sadistically beaten on a concrete floor for several hours in a prolonged and utterly brutal attack. According to Mr Ayaz's family, he had gone to visit people who he considered friends. Detective Superintendent Mark Swift of the West Yorkshire Police said that he was looking for other suspects who he believed had fled the country shortly after the killing. Their appeal process was denied by the appeal courts. What are your opinions on the crimes that were committed? Do you believe a sentence of 30 years and 2 sentences of 25 years is sufficient? Or do you believe he should have been sentenced to much longer? Also, what has happened to the missing suspects? Where do you think they are now? Please let us know in the comments below. Thanks for joining us today. If you like this content, please don't forget to like and share. And if you're new to this content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us, and as always, stay safe.